I recently made a video about daily habits that keep me on track after losing 70 pounds and help me to maintain my weight loss. And one of those habits is eating dessert every single night. So today I thought I could share with you a bunch of the different recipes that I like to have, quick and easy desserts that are lower in points and just help me to stay on track with my journey. Some of them will be a couple different variations. You'll see maybe some for the apple nachos and yogurt bowls, but that's just to give some different inspiration and show what ingredients you can really use to mix things up. Even if I have the same dessert every night, if it's a yogurt bowl or something, it really is easy to change up the flavors and still keep things pretty low point. If you enjoy this video or find it helpful, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. And let's get started with the first dessert. Starting out with one of the desserts that I make the most, and that is apple nachos. For these, you can use whatever type of apple you enjoy most. I used to always get Honeycrisp, and now lately I've really been enjoying Cosmic Crisp. I just start by slicing the apple into thin slices like this, and I usually like to get as many as I can because that's just more apple nachos I can eat. Something about the presentation with these makes them taste even better, so I always just lay them out nicely on the plate like this. I always choose something to drizzle onto them, and usually it's some type of peanut butter. Today I'm using Nuts and More peanut butter spread. I've got extra icing bags from my cookie business that are too thin to use, and I always get questions about what I drizzle my sauces and stuff with, and that's what they are. Using my food scale, I just reverse weigh the peanut butter into the bag, and then I drizzle it into a circular motion like this. And the peanut butter spread I used today was actually apple flavored, so I've also got some apple granola that I'm just weighing out using my food scale. I just put the whole plate of nachos on it. Then I always top them off with some type of sprinkles for a little extra sweetness and crunch, and that is my plate of apple nachos. Next up is another dessert that I make most frequently, and that is a yogurt bowl. I've tried a bunch of different vanilla Greek yogurts, but I always go back to the brand Dan & Light and Fit. It's just my favorite. I usually do a 2 or 3 point serving with it. And I just weigh it out using my food scale and scooping the yogurt into a bowl. With this bowl today, I was going for kind of like a PB&J vibe, so I've got some fresh raspberries and blueberries. Then again, I just use my food scale to weigh out 2 points of this Kashi Peanut Butter Crunch cereal. Sometimes if I've got some extra points to use for the day, I'll also drizzle some regular peanut butter on here or like a peanut butter spread. But it's a filling dessert that helps me to get some extra fiber as well as protein. This next recipe is a great breakfast, but I honestly end up having it for dessert more often. And that is a little French toast bake that I actually air fry. I start by whisking together some egg, milk, cinnamon, and a little bit of brown sugar sweetener. I like to use coconut brown sugar, but you could use whatever sweetener you prefer. I just had some sprouted grain bread in the fridge, so that's what I'm using today. I also really enjoy this recipe with sourdough bread, especially from the farmer's market, but this is just what I had today. So I just cut up the bread into cubes and mix it with the egg mixture. Then I'm also mixing in some blueberries. Sometimes I use fresh, today I just had frozen. And before I added the French toast bake in, I did make sure to spray the dish that I'm using with some nonstick olive oil spray. These specific ramekins I'm using today are actually from Target. They work perfectly fitting in my air fryer, and today I'm making us 2 bakes. But once I've got them both assembled and in their dishes, I also top them with a little bit of cinnamon topper. So the one I'm using today is just from the brand Flavor God. If I don't have any of that on hand though, I usually will just top it with a little bit of cinnamon sugar. Sometimes I'll make it with the coconut sugar that I used earlier. Then I just pop them into the air fryer. I usually bake them for 5 minutes, kind of move them around, do another 5 minutes, and move them until the egg is fully cooked through. Moving on, a dessert that I wish I made more often, but I always forget that I have a Creami. So I'm making some creamy ice creams. And there are so many different variations I've made with these. I can actually link a video in the description with more creamy recipes specifically, but I usually start with a liquid base like this, which is just a cup of fat-free milk. To that, I'm adding 10 grams of the cheesecake jello powder, the no sugar added one. So that one helps to add some nice flavor, and it also really helps the consistency. And then I've also got a scoop of protein powder that I add to each container. I'm just using the brand PE Science today, but I've tried a bunch of different ones that work really well with Creamies. I make sure to whisk these together really well so there's not any big chunks, and then once they are, I just put the lids on and pop them in the freezer. They usually take 24 hours to fully freeze. And then the next day I can use the machine to make the Creami. So I do add a splash of milk to help a little bit with the texture. And then I just hook it up to the machine. Once I've done one round, I kind of scrape down the sides like this, and sometimes it needs a little extra milk, so I add that. And I usually just respin it until I get this perfect consistency here. And this is the point where you can add in any mix-ins if you're going to be doing that, but I feel like most of the time I just end up putting some on top. And a lot of the times I like to have them with a banana and some sprinkles. I crave PB&Js a lot, and this is a good way for me to get that craving satisfied, and it's really not too high in points. So I'm starting off with one of these pitas that I got from Aldi. They're whole wheat and only 1 point for one on WeightWatchers, so I pop it in the air fryer to heat it up a little bit. I'm kind of picky with the jelly or preserves that I use, but we found this one that I really like from Mariano's, and it's just a no sugar added raspberry jelly. And you can actually have 1 tablespoon or 17 grams for 0 points on WeightWatchers, so I just use my food scale to reverse weigh that serving onto the pita. This is my favorite peanut butter to use that doesn't have a bunch of added extra sugar to it. I use 3 points worth and just again use my food scale to reverse weigh it. And because the pita is warm from the air fryer, it does make it even more melty. This was kind of messy, but it's the perfect little snack for only 4 points. There are a lot of times when I want dessert, but I still need a little bit more protein for the day, so that's when yogurt's really helpful. And I love making different yogurt dips to dip my apple in. So today I'm just using some vanilla Greek yogurt. This container specifically is from Aldi. I just chopped up a thin Oreo that I mix in with 2 points of peanut butter, and I just used my food scale to reverse weigh that peanut butter. Whenever I make a yogurt dip like this, I really like to mix it a lot because I find that it gets a little bit more whipped and it's just a better texture that way. But then I just slice up an apple and it ends up being the perfect amount of dip with that, and it's a nice, satisfying dessert. Next up, we're making some banana bread muffins, and this is just the banana bread recipe from my cookbook, but today I added some chocolate chips as well. I just start by mashing up 3 bananas with a fork, and the more ripe they are, the stronger banana flavor they have. So sometimes I'll actually save up some older bananas because they're perfect for this. But I crack 2 eggs and I add a container of unsweetened applesauce. I also add in some vanilla and milk, and I whisk that until it's nice and combined. Then to that, I'm adding the same coconut brown sugar that I used before. It's just my favorite option. But again, if you like to use Swerve or any other type of substitute, you can use what works best for you. Then I add 2 cups of buttermilk pancake mix. So a lot of the times I will use the brand Kodiak. I've also really been enjoying the Aldi brand, so that's what I have here today. I like to add some extra cinnamon, and then I just mix this together until it's combined. I wanted these muffins to be a little bit more indulgent today, so I did add some dark chocolate chips and just mix those in. And usually I make this banana bread into loaf pans, but today I'm doing muffins. I'm usually able to get about 22 muffins, so I spray a muffin tin with some nonstick olive oil spray, and then using a smaller scoop, I just divide the batter into each pan. I've had the oven preheating, so once I've portioned these out, I can just pop them in to bake. Usually I'll do 10 minutes, rotate them, and then another 10 minutes or so, and then they're perfect. And these do freeze well. Sometimes I'll make them to have before the gym, but lately I've really been enjoying them as a nice, sweet dessert. Next up, we've got another yogurt bowl. So this one I'm starting with a base of peaches, and these were actually frozen. As you can see, there's a good amount of liquid in them after I heated them up. So I'll just take the frozen peaches, put them in a bowl, and then microwave them at like 30-second intervals until they're no longer frozen. Once they're warmed up, I add some Dan & Light & Fit vanilla Greek yogurt that I just weigh out with my food scale. Usually I'll do about a 2-point serving. And I always need some type of crunch with my yogurt bowl, so I'm adding some cinnamon cereal today. I like to use the protein Cheerios or the brand Lovebird, but I find that with the peaches, a cinnamon or honey cereal goes best, although I have done fruity cereals before and they're just as good. I'm finding a little bit of a pattern as I'm making this video that I like to eat a lot of different breakfast type foods for dessert. So I'm making a waffle with strawberries, and I actually didn't have any buttermilk pancake mix at home today. So to make this waffle batter, I combined 3 tablespoons of flour, 2 tablespoons of whole wheat flour, a quarter teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of powdered peanut butter. I also added 8 grams of coconut brown sugar, a quarter cup of fat-free milk, and an egg. I mixed that up until it was combined, and then I've got my waffle iron heating up that I just sprayed with some nonstick spray. I pour the batter in and let it cook for a couple minutes and then flip it over. And I love to top my waffles with something sweet, so today I'm just using some frozen strawberries that I heated up in the microwave. They're perfectly sweet and juicy on top of the waffles. I like to even pour the liquid from after I microwave it because it's almost like a little bit of a strawberry syrup. And then depending on what I have on hand, sometimes I'll top it with some whipped cream or chocolate syrup or even chocolate chips to make it just a little bit more indulgent. This next one's kind of a mix of a yogurt bowl and an apple dip, but I'm just throwing the apple in with the yogurt, so it's kind of inspired by Snickers salad. I start by weighing out my 2-point serving of Dannon Light and Fit vanilla Greek yogurt. Then I just dice up half of a salty peanut barebell protein bar that works perfectly as a higher protein, lower point Snicker option for this. But honestly, if you wanted the real thing, that could work as well. You would just have to use some extra points. But I dice up my apple and mix that in with the yogurt. And I almost forgot, but I do like to add a little splash of vanilla. I feel like it adds such good flavor and makes it taste even more similar to the Snicker salad I used to make. But once it's all mixed together, that's it, and you have a nice higher protein filling dessert. This next dessert is one of my favorites to make. I just wish that I would take the time to make it more often, but it is making some cinnamon apples to have with yogurt. I start by dicing up an apple, and again, you can use whichever type of apple you prefer. Here I'm actually using a Honeycrisp. But once it's diced up, I just add it to a small pan like this that I can put a lid on with a decent amount of water. I usually add like 1 or 2 tablespoons. And I just cook those covered, stirring them every couple of minutes. You can see they start to simmer like this, but I just want them to get a little bit softer, not too soft that they become mush though. But once it gets to the right bite that I want it to be, I start to add some other ingredients. So I've got some cornstarch, a little bit of that coconut brown sugar, and some cinnamon. And the cornstarch helps it to thicken up a little bit and give it a little bit of a sauce. So sometimes I'll add a little extra water if it gets too thick because I prefer to have some extra sauce with this. But I just let that cook for a couple minutes till it's a little bit thickened up, and then I add it to a yogurt bowl. I usually do give it a couple minutes to cool down, but sometimes I actually like it when the yogurt gets nice and melty in it. But I just weigh out the portion of yogurt, and then I like to add something crunchy as well, so usually I'll do some type of like cinnamon cereal or granola or something like that. And I like to add the yogurt to give it a little more protein, make it more filling, but I could honestly just eat these apples by the spoonful. They are also really good on pancakes or waffles and different things like that. This next recipe is another one using yogurt, so I just weigh out a 2-point serving using my food scale. Again, Dannon Light and Fit vanilla Greek yogurt. Then to that, I'm adding a point of this Nuts and More powdered peanut butter. It's salted caramel flavor, so it gives it a little bit of extra flavor, but I also added a little bit of cinnamon. I just mix this together until it's combined, and then I was kind of going for like a banana cream pie flavor with this, so I'm slicing up a banana and just putting it on top of the yogurt. And then I feel like what ties this all together and just makes it so good is adding a little bit of whipped cream to the top. I also add a sprinkle of cinnamon, and if you wanted to add something to give it some crunch, that would be really good as well, but today this is how I had it. Okay, this next one is so basic, but I just wanted to include it because it is something that I have for dessert quite often. And it's just a bowl of cereal. So I've got a bunch of different cereals that have become my favorites. Like I mentioned earlier, I really like the brand Lovebird. I like Protein Cheerios, Panda Puffs. But I also find that slicing up a banana makes it a little more filling, a little more sweet. And then I just add some milk as well, usually fat-free, which helps to add a little protein. One of my favorite just regular not lightened up desserts is s'mores, so of course I had to find a way to keep it a little bit lower point, and I found these graham crackers that are actually wheat, so they are just like 1 point less, but if I can't find those, I'll usually just use regular graham crackers. Then I've got these mini marshmallows that I just weigh out a 1 point serving of, and I place it on the graham cracker with a skinny dipped peanut butter cup, which is 2 points. I pop them in the air fryer at the toast setting and it makes them nice and toasty. Once I put them together, it's so melty. It's actually such a messy dessert, but it's so enjoyable and it always satisfies my craving. Sometimes I even go back for a second one. I just recently shared this dessert in a what I eat in a day video, but I wanted to include it because it's so good and filling and it's just another version of apple nachos. Instead of using just regular peanut butter or a peanut butter drizzle, I'm mixing some powdered peanut butter with vanilla Greek yogurt. This definitely helps to make it a little more filling, but also to help me hit my protein goals. So I'm using an icing bag again to just squeeze the drizzle onto the apples. I slice up my apple into thin slices, and then today I decided I wanted some chocolate on these. So I've got these thin dark chocolate Reese's cups. And in order to spread them out on the nachos, I just dice them into smaller pieces. I'm not using them today, but one of my all-time favorite toppings for apple nachos is peanuts. I like to chop them up and then it makes it almost taste like a taffy apple. But once I have the apples sliced and laid out, I'm able to drizzle the yogurt peanut butter spread on them. I top it with the peanut butter cup and then of course some sprinkles. And today I also added some whipped cream. This next dessert is 0 points and one that I made for my 0 point day of eating challenges. I actually had a lot of followers make this and say they enjoyed it as well. Some of them added some chocolate, which I think I would definitely do next time, but I start by mixing up half a mashed banana with 2 tablespoons of unsweetened applesauce, a tablespoon of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, an egg, and some vanilla. I also mix in some cinnamon, and then I add a half cup of oats and 1 cup of frozen mixed berries. I also really want to make this again with some different fruits because so many other options would work in this other than just the berries. Even just like apple or peaches would be really good. But I used this baking dish that I got from IKEA. I sprayed it with some nonstick spray and then just spread out the bake. And then I just popped it in the oven at 350 and checked it every 5 minutes or so, rotating it. And like I said, this is 0 points, but it would be good with some added chocolate, whipped cream, or even ice cream. This next one is another yogurt bowl, but I just wanted to include it because this is the way that I make it the most often. I start with some frozen strawberries or mixed berries, microwave them. I top them with the serving of vanilla Greek yogurt, and then today I'm actually using cinnamon Cheerios and some chocolate peanut butter Love Crunch. I love when the little chocolate pieces get nice and melty. Sometimes I'll even add chocolate chips to this yogurt bowl, but this is definitely my go-to and my favorite way to have it. Next up, we are making some apple cookies. So I start by melting 3 tablespoons of butter in the microwave. You don't have to peel the apples, but I prefer to for these cookies. So I'm just peeling a Cosmic Crisp apple and then dicing it up into smaller pieces. Once the butter is melted, I add 3/4 cup of this brown coconut sugar. To that, I also add some vanilla, some cinnamon, and salt, and then I always keep these unsweetened applesauce containers on hand because they're so convenient for baking. So I add a container of that in, as well as 1 egg, and then I just whisk that together until it's combined. In a separate bowl, I mix together 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour with a half cup of whole wheat flour and then 1.5 cups of oats. I also add in a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and then I add a little extra cinnamon. I like to always add extra cinnamon to these things. Once I've mixed the dry ingredients together, I pour in the liquid ingredients and I mix those until combined. Then I add in the chopped apples. I've got a tray with parchment paper and I just use a scoop to evenly scoop out 24 cookies. Sometimes I'll have a little extra, so I just try to divide it evenly, but this way it comes out to 2 points a cookie. And I did start to press these down, but they are a little sticky, so sometimes I'll even just put on a glove and spray my hand with some nonstick spray so that I can flatten them, but today I didn't really mind if they weren't super flat. So once I've got those all scooped and portioned out, I pop them in the oven, which has been preheating to 375. Since we moved, I'm honestly still getting used to our oven and the temperature that things cook at, but I've just kept more of an eye on things as I bake them. So I usually pop them in for like 7 minutes, rotate them, do another 7, and then once they start getting brown on the top, then you know they're done. And I usually just put these in an airtight container and pop them in the fridge, or I freeze them. They are a really nice dessert, but sometimes I also like to use them as a quick pre-workout snack, just like the cinnamon zucchini cookies that I make all the time. This next recipe has been nice and refreshing this summer, so I really like these lemon meringue yogurts. They're 2 points for 1 container. I just mix it up well before I add anything, but I've got these lemon thin cookies that I got from Trader Joe's. I also really like the brand Dewey's if I can find those, but I'm crushing 2 of them up into the yogurt and mixing them in. I really like how these cookies kind of soften up when you mix them with the yogurt, but I also like to have a little crunch. So I top it with some whipped cream, which is also my favorite part, and then I've got 2 more cookies that I just break up on top. It's so simple and easy to do, but it adds so much to the flavor of the yogurt, and it's just a satisfying dessert. Then the last thing I wanted to include in this video is a sweet snack mix. So I start with some air pop popcorn, which is 0 points, and I spray it with this butter spray and some kettle seasoning. I usually pick 2 or 3 sweet things to add to this, so today I've got the Like Air cinnamon bun flavored puffs, as well as some Lovebird cinnamon cereal. And I just place the bowl of the snack mix on my food scale and then zero it out and add the serving that I want to the bowl. So usually I'll just pick like a 2-point serving in grams using my WW app. And depending on how many points I have left or what size snack mix I want, I just decide that way. So I'm adding those in, I mix it all together, and then I've got a nice crunchy and sweet snack mix. Okay, that wraps up some quick and easy dessert recipes that help me to stay on track with my weight loss and maintenance journey. If you guys enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.